welcome to the S.O.A.P Bible Study video series from Oak Tree Community Church in South Bend, Indiana. We are working our way through the book of Jeremiah, and we have come to our 9th week in the book, and this is going to be chapters 35 to 39, right? So we're almost basically
getting there.
3/4 of the way through here. Only a few more weeks, and we'll be done with this.
Yeah, kind of amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right.
A lot of good stuff in here, though. I mean, it's been long, but it's been really good.
Yeah, and it's been a little bit repetitious, but even with the repetition, there's generally new information in there, and we found that last week.
Yeah.
Right. The new covenant.
Yeah.
Something that we hadn't heard about before, but again, Babylon was attacking.
Yeah.
But we hear about the new covenant out of it.
Yeah. So shifting from the negative, the bad stuff is going to happen to the the future
you're gonna be restored.
Yeah.
Which is way cool.
Yep.
Way cool. So now we're in chapter 35, and it seems like chapters 35 and 36 we're jumping back again.
Yes.
Right. So this happens before the last couple of chapters, and we find that there's a group of nomads that are wandering around, because that's what nomads do, right? And
wandering around southern Israel, southern Judah, sort of, basically, right?
And they are following their ancestors' rules. Great grandfather, and they seem to be around for a couple hundred years, like 240 years, I think, was thrown out. Was that just us figuring it out, or maybe it was just a commentary I read said about 240 years.
Okay.
But for that length of time, they've been faithfully following the rules. Now, coming into Israel, you can see where we're leading here. And it's exactly what happened, right? So they came into Jerusalem because King Nebuchadnezzar is really attacking everybody, and he's coming in. So they're trying to find a safe hole.
Yeah, they're looking for some safety, and so they come into Jerusalem, which means they're not nomads anymore.
It also means they're not safe.
That's true too.
Gonna not be safe. But God says, look at their faith. I mean, they have followed the rules, and hey, Jerusalem, you haven't.
Yeah.
I mean, check out the difference.
And it's really cool. He says to Jeremiah, all right, why don't you invite them in for, a cup of wine, right? Into the temple. So they come into the temple, into one of the side rooms, and Jeremiah says, here, sit down, have some conversation, have some wine. And they're like, no. And it's not because they're against wine or against alcohol or whatever. It's because they said, our ancestors said there are certain things that we as a community are going to do and we are not going to do. And we've never violated those things. Jeremiah's like, that's pretty impressive. Wow.
Exactly.
And then God says, that's really impressive. Of course, God knew that.
Right.
Why don't you people obey me like that?
So were there other people in there too? It seems like there would be other officials.
Some elders and some other the people that Jeremiah is now going to have to scold.
So and then basically God says, look, because of your faith that you've had, one, he bestows a great honor upon them, but two, he tells Jerusalem bad things are going to happen to you because you failed all over the place many times. So it was a big thing that these guys get.
Well, he said that you will never lack someone to serve me. There's going to be an honor of serving him, which is really cool because these people were not even Jews. They're basically from Moses' in-laws family. So you go back, 1,000 years to Moses' in-laws, and somewhere down the line, they decided to create these rules, and they've lived in Israel, just like you said, as nomads in southern Israel, northern Arabia for a while. And they've been following their family tradition, family rules, which is fine. But God said, even this Gentile group is going to have the honor of serving me forever, into the kingdom and then moving on.
Cool thing.
Yeah, very, very cool. And he sets that up against the Israelites, and he said they're willing to follow man-made tradition just to keep it within their family. And they're doing it flawlessly, and you guys won't obey my commandments.
I
mean, we're talking night and day contrast here.
Right. So then we get into chapter 36. Imagine that. And we know that Jeremiah had delivered, quote, a bad message.
Yeah.
The
Lots
message
of them.
itself wasn't bad at all. It came from God.
Yeah.
It was truthful, and but it got received badly.
Always,
And he was flogged, thrown in jail, even though it came from God. It seems he was also barred from going back to the temple.
Yeah.
which was really, I'd read that a couple times.
Yeah.
So because you couldn't temper your message, or however it was, you're no longer allowed to speak in the temple.
Which is amazing, because you have these temple leaders, these priests, these so-called prophets or whatever. They're supposedly worshiping and serving God and offering sacrifices in the temple, and when he sends his spokesman to give them his message, they ban him.
Right.
Says, you're not allowed to speak here because you're interrupting our temple worship. Of what? Of whom?
Right.
The false gods or whatever that ultimately they were worshiping.
Right. So God comes up with a great idea. He tells Jeremiah to get a friend, and tells Jeremiah to dictate a letter.
Yep.
And so this guy's writing on a scroll everything that God told Jeremiah.
Which we don't know really how long this has been.
Right.
Exactly. So all of these messages, all of these everything, he's finally writing them down.
Yep. And then he tells the guy, go read it at the temple.
And we're like, hey, that's the book of Jeremiah, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So it was read to the people, and then the temple authorities got involved, and it was read to the temple authorities. Then it was read to the king.
Yeah, they're like, the king has got to hear all
yeah.
of these messages. I don't know if he's heard all this stuff. This is really important news. Nebuchadnezzar's coming.
Right. So the king burns the scroll.
Well, and I remember this is one of those deep memories from when I was just a little guy
Like
in
Treehouse
Sunday
Kids or
school.
whatever.
Yeah, just way back. We're talking,
Yep.
a long time now. And I remember this very story. One of the teachers, couldn't tell you who, but they were teaching this, and I remember that the king pulled out his pocket knife, in my
Yeah,
little memory, right?
right.
Pulled out his pocket knife, and as they were reading the scroll, he's cutting off pieces of the scroll with his little pocket knife and tossing them into the fire in front of him. I don't know why this particular one just in the deep recesses of my mind,
Yeah.
but I've always remembered that.
So like you said, a scroll had to be thick. And, reading it, and as they read it, the end part, he was just cutting it off.
It says-
and in my mind, he flicks a book, right? And then he's setting it on fire, and the guy reading the scroll is like, I guess I keep reading,
reading,
you're in front of the presence of the king.
Yeah,
and
it says
like, wow.
every 3 or 4 columns he just cut it off and he threw it in.
Yeah.
And now, can you imagine Jeremiah's friend Baruch, who has written all this stuff down, and now his scroll is being chopped up and burnt.
Right. And then the king says, by the way, arrest this guy and Jeremiah.
Yeah.
Too. So they get away. God allows them to go free. And then God, of course, says, write another scroll.
Yeah.
Get a scroll, write it back down.
Write it again. Write all that stuff, which I think really fits within the doctrine, what we would call the doctrines of inspiration and preservation. Not only did God miraculously bring to mind everything that he had already told Jeremiah so that it was accurate twice,
Right, yeah.
right? But also, whether it's dictated or whether, in this case it was dictated, but, some things are not, many are not. God has preserved this stuff because now the second scroll, which included more messages at the end of chapter 36.
And what was the extra lines? Do you remember?
Well, it just says of the same kind. They also added several other messages of the same kind.
Okay.
Right at the end of.
I had in there that none of the king's line would occupy the throne of David.
Right.
And his dead body would be thrown out into the street.
Yeah. Yeah, and that was part of it, and I think there was probably even more. And maybe this is what turned into what we know of as the book of Jeremiah, or some of those things.
Right.
But now, if it weren't for that second time,
we wouldn't have it.
we wouldn't have it. And so God said, "Nope, write it down again. I'm keeping it. You don't get to just burn my words. Write it again." Which is very cool. Just some of these really neat little things that we have recorded for us is just so cool.
Yeah. So chapter 37, it starts with talking about Zedekiah, and we learn that he was elevated to the throne by King Nebuchadnezzar.
Yep. And we've been told that a couple of times now, you know.
Right, but verse 2 really gets to me. It says, neither he nor the officials who served him nor the people of Judah paid any attention to what the Lord said through the prophet Jeremiah.
Yep.
So Jeremiah was a prophet for a long time, started at, we're told, a very young age,
Yep.
and now absolutely nobody's listening to him.
Yeah, and again, this is still we've jumped back in time a little bit. We're told Jeremiah in verse 4 had not yet been put into prison. Okay,
Right,
so he's
right.
still free. He's still wandering around preaching. Okay,
Right.
and so and Babylon had temporarily stopped their siege.
Right. So they had Jerusalem under siege, and then something happened where they had to break off.
Yeah.
And that something was Egypt.
Yeah,
right?
Egypt keeps popping its head back up every once in a while,
Right.
like a little prairie dog.
Right, so it seemed like Egypt's army was on its way to Jerusalem.
Yep.
So Nebuchadnezzar stopped and started, and
Yep.
then Egypt said, we were just kidding.
Yeah,
It was like false alarm or
well,
something.
that's because he's already spanked them once, and
Yeah.
they're like, sort of like, flaring their colors, type thing. And Nebuchadnezzar says, "You want a piece of this?" No. I think we'll stay put on our side of the boundary.
Yeah. So if you think about it, if you're under siege, basically nothing's coming in and nothing's going out. Not
Right.
that people, it did seem, could go and surrender.
Yeah.
And be taken back to Babylon, but food has to be getting scarce.
Right.
So for them to leave is a huge thing.
Yep.
And Jeremiah decides that he wants to go back to his homeland, and he was a Benjaminite.
Yep.
I think I pronounced that right.
Yep.
Which is close to
Yeah, it's not far.
Jerusalem, but so he's leaving out of a gate.
Yeah.
And of course, people are like, he's taken off.
Yeah.
Stop him.
Yep.
He
Yep.
must be stopped.
They thought that he was turning himself over to the Babylonians.
Right.
And that would have meant, which is funny because they didn't believe him anyway. And so
And they didn't
why
want him
would
there. I know.
Yeah, why would they care? If he's doing it, that means God's no longer with us. You're not listening to him anyway. You don't think God is with him. So,
Right.
Jeremiah's like, "No, I'm not." They're like, "Yes, you are." And then they get this battle.
That's pretty much what it was.
So they arrest him. I mean,
Yeah.
that's the...
Yeah, well, so he gets thrown into a cistern, chapter 38. I'm not sure how much I jumped ahead.
Yeah.
And he actually gets some help. Now I think this is where the wishy-washy part with the king comes into play.
Yeah.
Because the king talks to him, and people are like, well, we got to kill him. And the king's like, okay,
Yeah.
so let's throw him in a cistern.
Well, so in chapter 37, they're like, "King Zedekiah, we have to kill this guy." He's like, "I can't stop you. Go do it."
Yeah.
So they don't.
Right. Well,
They throw him in a cistern so that he could starve.
yeah, right. But we didn't kill him.
But we didn't
right.
kill
So
him,
we're
right.
clean in front of God, but it's
Right.
but yet
Right.
he's dead. And then
So then somebody comes to the king, an
and
Ethiopian,
says, I want to save this guy.
and he's like, "Yeah, it's probably a good idea. We shouldn't kill him. We should save him."
Yeah,
It's like,
here's 30 guys to take with you to help.
Zedekiah is just,
Yeah.
I mean, it's like he has no spine. He's just, whatever's right in front of him is the thing he's going to do.
Yeah.
By the way, this concept of this cistern full of mud or something, I think is where there are some songs, some older songs, some newer songs that bring out the concept of the miry pit, the miry clay, and you've pulled me out of the muddy pit. I think this is where where some of that
Because he even grabs some clothes, right? And they have them put the clothes under the arms, and because we're going to put a rope around you and pull you up, and you're stuck in the mud, so it's going to be a lot of force.
It's going to be under your armpits, and again, some of this historical narrative that you can, it really brings you into the account. I mean, it's like you're sitting there watching them trying to, trying to get him out of the mud as he's sinking in. And so that picture of God has pulled me out of the muddy pit.
Right.
I think some of that comes
Some
from
of it's in there?
this Jeremiah. Yeah.
So it seems the king believes that Jeremiah is speaking from God.
Yeah.
He just doesn't like what he's being told,
Well, yeah.
right? Which from his standpoint, it is all bad.
Yeah, well, the thing is, though, let's not forget Nebuchadnezzar is the one who's put
Right.
Zedekiah into place,
Right.
and Jeremiah, God has Jeremiah say, "You surrender to Nebuchadnezzar. Don't fight him. If you surrender, you'll die in peace. You'll go to Babylon. You're not going to, die in war, and Jerusalem's not going to be burnt. Things will go well."
Right.
Which is the same thing he's been telling the captives. Stay put,
Right.
don't fight, and things will go well
Right.
for you.
So again, the guy that put you in charge, he's saying don't fight him.
Right.
Which seems like a logical thing, right?
Very
He put
logical.
you in charge.
Yeah, and that's
let's not
Jeremiah's
follow-
message.
Let's not follow it.
Yeah. So what does he do?
Doesn't follow
He
it.
doesn't follow it. But Jeremiah, or Zedekiah rather, it comes to Jeremiah in secret, and there's this meeting, and
Right.
there's this stuff. What should I do? It's like, you keep asking me for a message. I've been telling you the same thing
Right.
over and over.
Well, and then even after that, hey, some of the guys may come, and if they do, you need to lie and tell them.
Yeah, don't tell them what we talked about.
Yeah, tell them instead this.
Yeah.
This-
Which Jeremiah did. He's not gonna, he's not ratting on the king because he's
Right.
still trying. He's still hoping for the best for Jerusalem and Israel at this
Right.
point.
Right. So then we get to chapter 39, and the title is Jerusalem Falls.
Yep.
So we know what's going to happen. So King Nebuchadnezzar had laid siege again. Was 6 months into it. He was able to break through a wall.
Yep.
So imagine how solid these walls are, right?
Yeah.
So, 6 months, and you got to believe they're throwing stuff down from the top. And
Yep.
so Zedekiah and some of his men try to escape.
Yep.
Right.
Instead of turning himself over, like
Right.
Jeremiah said.
Right, so they take off. They're captured by the Babylonian army. All of the people with him were killed.
Yep.
He had to watch. Some of his sons were killed in front of him.
Yep.
Then his eyes were gouged out.
Yeah, intentionally, all of his sons were slaughtered right in front of him, and that was the last thing he saw. Now, God had said, submit to Nebuchadnezzar. You'll live in peace. You'll die in peace in Babylon, not here.
Yep.
And Jerusalem will be basically saved, preserved, right?
Yep.
Instead, he runs. His family's killed. His friends are killed. His eyes are punched out. He doesn't die in peace. He doesn't die in war, but he doesn't really die peacefully. Right. And Jerusalem is burnt.
And the next line is Jerusalem was burned and the walls were torn down.
It was completely unnecessary. God had said, this is how you preserve it. And Zedekiah is just not willing to go.
Oddly enough, some people do remain, right? Some of the very poor were left, and Nebuchadnezzar told them to start farming.
Yeah. He doesn't want him. I mean, he doesn't want the drain on his resources. So,
Right.
I mean, instead of letting the land just get overrun with wild animals and weeds and everything, you know what? You guys are the winners.
Yeah. And the Ethiopian was told that he would also live
because he was
of his faith.
Yep. Help Jeremiah.
Yeah. And then King Nebuchadnezzar also specifically asked that Jeremiah not be harmed.
Yeah.
So did he know him?
Well, I mean, we're talking. This has been now about 20 years that Jeremiah has been telling different kings of Israel, of Judah rather, Nebuchadnezzar's coming, submit to him, and all will go well, right? Obviously, this has, gotten back to Nebuchadnezzar at some point. Let's not forget Daniel, in Daniel chapter 9, now after Nebuchadnezzar's time, but in Daniel chapter 9, he's reading the book of Jeremiah. So this stuff is obviously going back and forth.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And
we know at some point he wrote some letters back and forth.
Yeah, back to the
So at
exiles.
some point Nebuchadnezzar goes crazy.
Yeah.
And then comes back. When is that in relation to this?
It's going to be before this.
Before this. So
I would have to double check my dates.
Okay.
Honestly.
Well, I was just thinking from a God
Probably
thing,
after this,
right? So you'd pay more attention to a prophet from God.
Yeah.
After that episode.
Yeah, But that probably happened after this. Actually, come to think of it, I would have to double check my dates, but probably after this.
All right.
I would think this is 586. This is the final. This is the fall of Jerusalem. This is the third of 3 captivities or times that Nebuchadnezzar has come to Jerusalem.
So from our standpoint now, in our story, and again we keep jumping back and forth. There's nobody left in Jerusalem. The city is
very poorest.
Right. Enough to say nobody's left.
Yeah.
A remnant has been taken back to Babylon at least 2 or 3 times.
Yep.
We think somewhere in the 50,000 range, or was that how many came back?
That was coming back.
Coming back.
Yeah, that was coming back later.
So less than that.
No, I mean the whole nation's gone now.
Right. Yeah. Right. And the temple is gone, and all the walls are torn down.
All the walls torn down, burnt, everything. This is it. Israel as a nation no longer exists at this point.
Right. So the places where we hear people are going to steer clear of Jerusalem.
Yeah.
I mean, there was nobody to bury the dead.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a mess.
Yeah.
In 70 years, people are going to be coming back. In 70 years.
And Jeremiah is still here, and we're gonna see there's still some narrative that has to happen and stuff. We've still got about 12, 13 chapters left to the end, but it's a pretty dire situation for Israel at this point, Jerusalem.
Right.
So it's sort of a sad place.
To
Yeah, I was going to say it's sort of a sad place to end, actually. But that brings us to the end of this week's reading. As you go through it, feel the emotion that's going through here. Feel the emotion that Jeremiah has. This is now, historically, we're at the point where he's probably writing Lamentations. Okay? He's the weeping prophet. He's seeing these things that he has preached so long now coming to fruition. How long is this going to last? How long do we have to... even though he knows 70 years of captivity and everything, how long are these people going to turn away from you and go away from you? And that's where we get the book of Lamentations. Your mercies are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. So we're not reading Lamentations at this point, but it's not very long. It's a good place to read this and see where his heart is in the middle of all this destruction.
Yeah. All right, good.
So until next time, hope you enjoy this reading. If you have any questions or comments, please send them our way. Otherwise, we'll see you back here starting in chapter 40 next time.
Bye, everybody.